Look, it can be very confusing if you're going into the market for an iPad Air and then you see the M1 iPad Pro. And of course, they're both available in 11-inch options. The shell's almost the same. We saw this in 2020. I'll actually pluck this off the Magic Keyboard, and this is a beautiful color for the Magic Keyboard. Of course, if you don't want it getting dirty, then you can always go for this color. But I honestly have been using the iPad Air just like this for the last, 2 years now, where I put it onto the keyboard and all my daily tasks, from emails to watching content to quick edits for the Tech Today show, and even a little bit of social media stuff, and of course reading Kindles and stuff like that, is all done on this one device. In terms of battery efficiency and stuff like that, I don't know how this would perform. Obviously, it's the M1. It should be a lot more power efficient, but it's also way more powerful than the A14 on last year's iPad Air, or last year's iPad Air. We're talking about the display and design. Of course, this is a 10.9-inch screen, and of course, it comes with a liquid retina display capable of up to 500 nits of brightness. Yes, it doesn't have 120 Hz, and we'll get to that in a bit, but the LED panels support Apple's True Tone, which actually means the color and intensity of the displays for a comfortable viewing experience is sorted no matter what the lighting condition. And of course, it also supports the Apple Pencil 2nd generation. So what I'm trying to say is that everything is interchangeable when you're talking about accessories. Use an Apple Pencil on the 2020 edition, you can use the same one on the 2022 edition, same performance. You want to use a Magic Keyboard, you can use it on either devices. So all the accessories work. In fact, if you're using an iPad Pro from before, and that's an 11-inch model, even those accessories will work on this. So that's what Apple makes it very easy along and across their product line to actually, get a fantastic user experience. Of course, it runs on iPadOS, and a lot of us have complained before about how iPadOS should be a lot more like macOS. But we must give Apple credit when it comes to iPadOS, because with iOS 15 or iPadOS 15, there is this very desktop-like experience that you can now enjoy on these tiny iPads, and I think that's cool because they come with touchscreen. But when will that super device come from Apple, which has a touchscreen, works like this, and then works on maybe something a little bit more like macOS? I don't think they're doing that anytime soon, but until then, we will make do with iPadOS as it is, and let's hope it gets better. In terms of design language and utility, one whoosh from 2020 to 2022, not a lot has changed, like I said, on the outside. It still comes, of course, with a USB-C port, although now with an M1, this is twice as fast when you compare it to the last iPad Air. And then, of course, it also comes with Touch ID integrated in the power button. If you were to go for an iPad Pro, then you would have Face ID and you wouldn't have Touch ID. Now, it all comes down to personal preference. Do you prefer, a fingerprint scanner, or do you prefer a Face ID scanner? In a world where a lot of us are living with masks, no matter what Apple does to change, Face ID, Touch ID seems a lot more convenient, and perhaps this should become the gold standard when it comes to Apple devices. That is a feature exclusively reserved for the Air, and it's not still on the Pro. The iPad Air comes in space gray, starlight pink, purple, and a darker blue, and this is perhaps my favorite color ever on an iPad. So hats off to Apple. I think what they must do now is give us a Magic Keyboard in this color, and that will sell like hotcakes. Well, you heard it first on Tech Today. Again, when you're looking at both iPads from 2020 or 2022, you'll see that the camera at the back looks the same, and frankly, it is the same. It's a 12-megapixel shooter, which is the primary camera, and honestly, it shouldn't be a selling point when it comes to iPads, because you can put maybe a LiDAR sensor and another 1,000 cameras at the back on an iPad Pro, but where are you going to use it? You're going to use it maybe for a couple of photos, maybe for a few FaceTime calls if you want to show people what you're looking at, and then of course maybe to scan documents. This will suffice. It's a great camera and all you need on a tablet. It's on the front side, on the selfie side, that things change. Of course, the placement of the camera is still out here on the side, so when you're using it like a laptop, it's going to be a little weird in terms of your look. If you're using it in portrait mode, it's perfectly fine. But things change altogether dramatically, because now what Apple is emphasizing on is the fact that the front camera is a new 12-megapixel camera. It's not just clarity, but it comes finally with center stage. What is center stage? It's Apple's new feature, which we saw on their other iPads, which can actually track you when you are actually walking around, or if your head bobs a little too much like I am right now, then the camera tracks you. It's an ultra-wide sensor which gives you that sort of leeway to move around. So if you're cooking, doing something interesting, I use it all the time when I'm chatting with the Tech Today team and we're planning out the show. I have this weird habit of walking around and you can see, well, that the camera keeps tracking me and I'm a little less annoying for my team. But like I said, Apple knows exactly what they're doing when it comes to pricing, and that's exactly what happens with the iPad Air 2022. It happened in 2020 as well, only this time they've given you an extra feature, which is the M1 chip. Inside this, of course, had the A14, which was on the iPhone, a great chip, but this guy is almost twice as powerful, especially when you're talking about multi-core performance. Well, for our final verdict, I'm going to break it down for you. Although you can't really go wrong if you pick up a Pro, this, or even the iPad, because they're all great devices from the Apple ecosystem. But if you really are considering this is the device in your crosshairs, then we'll break it down into a couple of points. The first point being the reason you're going for the new guy over the old guy, which is 2022 versus 2020, and maybe spending a little bit more money or getting a good deal on it, is the fact that you want an M1 chip. You're obsessed with this mighty M1 revolution that's going on at Apple. 2 is the fact that you want center stage when you're on FaceTime calls. The third reason is a shaky one. 5G for me is really not a big deal at this point, especially when you can connect to your phones all the time using a hotspot. But if that's also something that you want to consider, well, then the iPad Air now also comes in a cellular version, which gets a lot more expensive. Talking about the price, Apple's been very, very smart about this because they only give you the Air editions, the old one, new ones, whatever you talk about, in 64 GB and 256 GB. Now, those are weirdly on the opposite ends of the spectrum. I still think 64 GB is a little too less, because if you're going to use the M1 and harness the power of the M1, then you need at least 256 GB or 128 GB as a base model, and that's not available. 64 GB edition will cost you 55,000 rupees, and the 256 GB edition will cost you nearly 69,000 rupees. But this is when things get interesting and the theory of the way Apple prices things comes in, because now if you consider the iPad Pro, go on the Apple website and you have, well, the 11-inch iPad Pro, which is for 128 gigs, it's around 72,000 rupees. And for the 256 gig version, it becomes 80,000 or 81,000 rupees. Well, that of course is pricing for the 11-inch editions. If you really want a bigger iPad, which is as big as a MacBook almost, the 13-incher, well, then that is a different ball game altogether. And of course, you can get the mini LED and stuff like that. But if you're comparing apples to apples, see what I did there? 11-inch to almost 11-inch, then the iPad Air can be compared to the iPad Pro. Now, if you are actually trying to compare the two, now they both come with M1. What's the difference? The major difference comes in with a Pro Motion display, which means that the Air can only operate on a refresh rate of 60 Hz. That's, well, 60 times per second. The Pro comes with Pro Motion and can go up to 120 Hz. To be very honest, if you put the two together, 99% of the people, it won't make a difference to. But now if you pick up a 128 GB version of the iPad Pro or a 256 GB version of the iPad Air, well, they almost cost the same out here in India, and that might be where you need to really make a decision. I'll make it simple for you in 10 seconds. iPad Air versus iPad Pro, both have M1. If you need Pro Motion, then you need to go for the iPad Pro, spend a little bit more money and get the iPad Pro. But if you don't need Pro Motion, then this will do the job, and it is a mighty good tablet, and of course going to be my daily driver henceforth.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.